All right, Cubs fam, we are joined today by the one and only Salacious B. Crumb to take questions on this post that we have from Capital Games breaking down gear changes coming to the game. We basically got two big things to talk about. We got Territory War changes with Relic 9. They'll be surprised to see Territory War be the avenue for Relic 9, and I'm not sure how I feel about that part of the post. So we might get the tough questions out of the way at the beginning, and then at the end, it's just going to be smiles because these gear updates are super exciting, and I'm beyond amped for these gear updates. I think before we even get into it, Crumb, I want to tell you, like, seeing you guys address the gear crunch in this way, like a really thorough addressing of the gear crunch, and this is only phase 1. I think a lot of players right now are breathing a sigh of relief right now. I think a lot of us didn't think you would ever do it, and so I'm stoked, man. I'm so glad you guys are doing that.
Yeah, it's awesome. I'm so excited we finally get to announce this stuff. It's really great to finally get that out there. I think there's a lot of really player facing and really positive stuff for people in that gear update. It's really cool. We can go into the details, I'm sure, as we go through the post.
Yeah, we got some things to unpack here with all of it. So let's start on the Territory War stuff. And full disclosure, Crumb, I really got mixed feelings on. Well, first, I'm not going to be excited about Relic 9, and also Territory Wars. I think maybe part of this is our perception of Territory Wars because of how the matchmaking has been. Having an emphasis on winning is probably going to make people antsy, especially when it's so important to Relic 9. So how did you guys discuss that and arrive on the conclusion that we're going to emphasize winning here?
Yeah, I think there was a lot of back and forth on that. We were talking just before this that I definitely had mixed feelings about it as well, being like, does it make sense to emphasize winning? And ultimately in this game is about, improving your roster and then having places to show it off, and you should be rewarded for being successful. I think the core thing for me is that we didn't change any of the existing rewards. You're going to get the same that you've got before,
Okay.
and some more on top of that. You've got the raid gearbox and the core gearbox for the upper tier folks, but everyone's going to get that raid tier box. And then there's also the Relic 1 through 7 stuff, and the Arrow Mags, and then Relic 9. But those last couple pieces are really emphasizing on winning, and so it's like you're kind of getting just a little bit more benefit at the top if you are winning, as opposed to just like you were doing before. But
Okay.
I think ultimately this game is about competition, and it's about being better than your opponent, and I think this helps emphasize that. Though it is definitely I think my major hangup was like, Territory Wars has never been this way before.
Yeah.
How does it feel different now? And so it's something we're definitely going to monitor closely. Like, does this make sense? Is there a lot of negative sentiment around like the losing? But we've also, part of this was updating the matchmaking, which we knew if we're going to make any kind of like win incentive inside Territory Wars, that it had to come with matchmaking changes, because we know that's a big concern for players. Has been over for years. Sandbagging with characters that like you get a small number of very high powered players, and you get a lot of stuff. You get a lot of value out of that. The new matchmaking system, accounts for all that stuff, right? And it allows it, so hopefully you're getting much more even matches. I will say that the matchmaking system as well is definitely also I'd say a phase 1 as well. It's something we want to improve over time. We've got a different system at the back end, calculating how to balance out teams that accounts for all this extra stuff. But we want to definitely do more with that in the future. So this is not the end of the line for matchmaking changes in Territory Wars, for sure.
And I like that it's taken into account the loss streak. I think that's something I've always wanted to see, because some guilds just get on a bad streak, right? Or maybe the way the guild is farmed, it's just they're in difficult competition, and so the more you lose, the more you're going to be facing the losers, right?
Yeah, and it's hard because I wanted to go into more detail in this post around how the matchmaking system changed and was different, but also the core of it is is like to not give people information on how to exploit it, right?
Yeah.
And I think we've done a pretty good job of cutting off all those edge cases, that there's not really an easy way. Like you can't like swap between guilds constantly to try and like make that win streak or win loss streak happen, right? It's only based on losses, so you're really only hurting yourself if you're jumping between guilds to try and do this. So I believe we've caught all the edge cases, but I said we're going to definitely monitor this one closely to make sure there's no bad behavior that comes of it. But I think overall it's a really good change.
Okay. All right. We got some questions coming in from the chat. Here's one question from Tyrick Thorn, who wants to know, are the Territory War changes the only changes that are in today's update?
you got the territory war changes, you've got Relic 9, and you've got all the matchmaking changes related to that. So and all the reward changes. So today's update, like almost like toyed with calling it like phase 0, like a starting place.
Yeah.
But it's like it's not big enough to really it's like we did this stuff for territory wars now because we knew we were going to do the gear changes soon, so it made sense to like tie right into that right now and do these now as opposed to waiting for later. So it's Ranger in the chat there. Hey, what's going on, Ranger? And today it said only the things that are listed as today and those territory wars changes. Like we try to call it specifically because these are happening at 2 different times.
Here's another good question about territory wars, and I think this is an important question to ask. What percentage of sub 300 million GP guilds do you expect are going to break up as a result of this change? I mean, we're seeing on this table, 300 million is the gate for Relic 9. And so any players that are competitive in a 280, 260, 240 million guild, was that a discussion you guys had, and where are you guys at? How do you feel about that?
Yeah, I definitely brought up to the team quite a few times, like what is the impact on guilds? Like obviously we don't want to shake up guilds too much. But there's also still a drive to, be at the best guild. If you're interested in Relic 9, then keep pushing towards that and keep trying to find the best guild that suits your needs. So it's complicated, but I would say that we were hoping that this is not like causing some massive pain point among guilds. From our initial testing and looks at it, it should be okay. But it's definitely something we want to monitor. And if it's doing some really bad behavior with guild leaders and stuff like that, we'll definitely address it.
Okay, good. Yeah, I kind of just based on my vibe, I think there's plenty of players in the 280 to 200 million range who are going to have plenty of Relic 8s, and so I hope that could maybe eventually expand. I think that's one of my concerns, just kind of glancing at it. Let's see. Any other territory war? I think I know the answer to this, but Exo's asking if the GP start is based on the GP that the guild joins TW with. I'm guessing that's the case, right? This is how much you're joining with. So if you sandbag, you've got a 380 million guild, but you join only 240 million of your guild, then that's the bracket you're in, right?
Exactly. So you are going to get worse prizes if you try and like drop your GP down a bit. And again, like it's going to compensate for the less number of players you're bringing into battle there as well to some degree. So like you probably don't want to do that in general.
Yeah, that's good. Yeah. So I think this is probably going to shake up. One way I see this changing the guild atmosphere right now is a lot of guilds are really relaxed about territory wars. It's kind of like join if you want, don't join if you don't feel like it. I know that's how my guild is. I actually skipped the last 2 rounds of territory wars because I'm just kind of burnt out right now. And so I think that's going to put a lot more emphasis on all 50 joining so you can have a chance at the highest rewards possible. So now I want to ask some specific questions about Relic 9. We see we've got 5/1 for the rewards at the top, 4/1, 3/1, 2/1, 1/0. For Relic 9, is this going to be like all the other Relic levels where you need like everything that I needed for Relic 8 basically, and then these Relic 9 materials, or are we changing how that leveling works once you're at Relic 8?
No, it's the same old system that we've seen before, right? You're going to just need these 2 additional materials on top of it.
Okay, so there's still going to be quite a lot there. And is it going to be 20 needed for that?
I don't remember the exact numbers, but I believe it's around that. So I'd have to look that up. But yeah, it's not like substantially different from Relic 8, if I remember correctly.
Okay, so pretty much the same. So if you're in a guild in Division 23 who's able to win consistently, then you're going to see 4 territory wars before you've got the ability to upgrade a single Relic 9 character, right?
Yeah, that's correct.
Okay, and is this is exclusively where you're dropping the ability to do Relic 9? There's not going to be any pay-to-play packs?
There'll be probably some packs and bundles around it, but for the initial launch at least. But yeah, I mean, right now, Relic 9, we want to keep it to Territory Wars. That's definitely not to say we will not be expanded to other places in the future, but for now, we're going to roll it out slowly and initially in this position. I think just kind of like we did with Relic 8, we expanded it over time to being available in more places like Conquest, like here. That's the plan as well. In the foreseeable future is likely to do the same thing with Relic 9, but initially just Territory Wars.
Okay, cool. You may not know this, but Darth Lucas had a good question. Do you know if Relic 9 is going to require the arrow magnifiers as well?
I believe it's just like the other relics, so it sweeps up everything behind it as well. Yeah.
Okay.
So
A
you're
man
gonna need
can
more,
a
more of
man
those
can dream.
Aeromanos.
A man can dream.
Yeah. And shout out to oh, was that Darth Lucas you said?
Yeah.
Yeah, shout out to him for a big donation yesterday on the stream. So appreciate that,
Oh,
man.
did he? Awesome.
For
Yeah, that's
charity.
awesome. It was a good opportunity to pause here and plug. Crumb does stream on Twitch as well, which you guys are going to want to check out because he's not streaming for himself. He's streaming for charity every time, and I love that you do that, and it's a good thing to support and just hang out. Plus, it's hard to compete with the facial hair and the hair in general,
Thanks.
which you're
thanks
not
for bringing it up,
gracing
man.
us with today. I'm a little disappointed by that.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I got up early here. I haven't showered. I'm not looking my tops today. But yeah, I appreciate you bringing up the charity stream because yeah, and we're less than I think 3 weeks away from our official Capital Games charity stream
Yeah.
that I'm leading up to. But yeah, if you hang out, play games, try and raise money for a good cause, we broke over 6,000. Thanks to Heinze on Friday. He donated a bunch of money from him and his community. So shout out to him
That's
as well.
awesome. That's awesome.
And the milestone, I said I was going to give away a bunch of swag. So I'm giving away
Ooh.
Galaxy Heroes phone chargers and water bottles and sunglasses and things like that. So
Sunglasses.
yeah,
I want some Swugga sunglasses. I want a Galaxy Heroes merch store. I've always wanted that. So because I've got a hoodie that you guys sent me several years ago, and
I'm
that's
jealous.
it,
I don't even have one of those hoodies.
dude. I rock that thing all the time. I actually wear it in public, and I'm like, I really hope somebody's gonna come up to me and be like, I play that game. So far, nobody has.
Well, it's also COVID times, right? So it's probably not seen a lot of people.
I've been doing it since you said it to me like 3 years ago.
Okay, well maybe not then. I don't know.
All right. Somebody asked if future GLs will require Relic 9. I'm assuming the answer to that question is yes. I don't know if you can even confirm that, but I would just assume that you're eventually going to do that, right?
I don't think we have anything announced at that time, but I think that's probably a safe bet. I mean, I haven't. I can tell you, I have not seen any of the details around any sort of future Galactic Legend stuff. So,
Okay.
likely, I would say that that's the case.
Okay. All right. Okay, I think that's pretty good on the Territory War / Relic 9. That one's a little bit more wait and see for me. Fortunately, with where that grind is at, my hope is that that doesn't impact the free-to-play players too much because you're going to have, obviously, most of the people are going to be the whales, the really high GP accounts that are going after this first. And so running into Relic 9 characters probably won't be super hot on your plate at the beginning, and then eventually that expands. Now, you mentioned in this that we were expanding the availability of Relic 8 materials. I think that was I'm trying to remember where that was. It was in Raids, right?
Yeah. So there's also changes to challenge
Oh,
tier
here
pit
it is.
coming.
Yes. Okay, yeah. So we've got. I want to talk about this real quick because I think before we even get to the multi-phase gear update, this also deserves a lot of applause. I think because one of my biggest problems with raids for a long time has been scaling the rewards because it pits you against your guild members not in the best way, and you kind of get rewarded by ditching your guild and going to an easier guild to get rank 1 in, and that to me is kind of counterintuitive. Like my motive should be to be in the best guild I possibly can, not to be in the lowest GP guild possible that beats the Crancor raid so that I can get number 1 through, number 5 or whatever to get meaningful arrow magnifiers. And so now we're sitting at, 7 across the board basically for the top 40 members of the guild, which almost every guild you're going to have at least 10 people who are just joining and maybe not doing anything. So I want to give you a chance to talk a little bit about that. I think this is one of the most positive changes that I see in this post as well.
Yeah, for sure. And if you hit refresh, because I screwed up the math on this one when I was posting it this morning. The numbers are all the same. It's just the totals at the bottom because the number of people who are getting stuff is different. So the new amount is actually more than it was before. Before it kind of looked like you were getting the same amount overall, but really your guild is getting more because the lower tier members, there's more of them and you're getting more of those things as well. So, but yeah, I think this is a really important change for us as well as we move into things like Relic 9. Obviously things like Relic 8 need to be more available. Like right now it's still pretty difficult to get that. Like your choice around who you to bring to Relic 9 is like a very, very difficult choice. So definitely we want to make sure that's a little bit more available for folks so that's out there. Also with the additional draw from if you're going up to Relic 9, you're going to need those as well. So we definitely want to make sure that those are a little bit more out there. And as you said, like it's frustrating when you're in a guild and you want to work together, but you're sort of incentivized to go the other direction on that, right? That's not a great experience for folks.
Yeah, and I'd like to see even more evening out of the rewards. This is kind of the most important reward in Raid, so I'm pretty much good with this. I'd love to see that expand to pretty much every reward and kind of treat it more like we do territory wars or territory battles. But
Yeah, and not to jump ahead too much, but that's a lot of our thought with like the territory battle rewards, right? Like we want that
yeah.
those guilds who are in the sort of middle range to get more rewards so they can catch up a little bit faster, right? Like there's and this is sort of, I guess it's a separate topic, but part of that as well is like, so it's not as much of a competition between, if how fast you can get it or how far you can get up there. You're going to get about the same amount of rewards as someone at the top box now.
Speaking of territory battles, Fatalorian had an important question. Do the territory battles changes here that you talked about apply to Hoth only, or is it Hoth and Geo? I'm guessing it's both.
It's both.
Good.
Both for these changes.
Very solid.
Yeah, there's none of this is specific to just Hoth. I think, even, yes, while Hoth is something that a lot of new players are doing, there's still a lot of players who are in the mid levels who are on GOTB, right? Like that's not if you're still working on getting up stars in Geonosis territory battle, you haven't obviously mastered it, and you're still on your progress to get into kind of like the very, very bit of the end game there, where you're like, have all that all mastered and getting max stars on it. I think there's only still a handful of guilds who can max out stars on some of those things. So
Right. Okay, cool. Yeah, that's good to see. That's really good to see. Snake, by the way, thanks for dropping a sub. So let's move on and talk about the gear, and to kind of, I'll let you kind of intro this, and then I'm gonna I've got some questions coming in on Discord that I'm looking at. For everybody who is still typing in questions, let's keep all those questions from here on out focused on the multi-phase gear update. There we go. Thank you for another sub, and this is, in my opinion, and I'm not just saying this because you're here, I think this is the most player-friendly change I've ever seen you guys post on your forums. I'm super stoked about this. How long has this been in the works, and what has this process been like to be able to finally say, yes, we are addressing the gear crunch?
How long has this been in the works, man? I mean, since we did like the shard economy changes,
Okay.
You
mentioned it then. I've been holding you to that. I'm like, November 2020, they said gear was part of this.
Yeah. no, and it's something that we've brought up constantly, and there was a big push over the last couple of months to be like, guys, we need to solidify this. We've been talking about it for a while. There's some, a lot of changes coming with some things like Relic 9 and Territory Wars that like this is a good opportunity to also push this as well. So, and we've been working on it, trying to do the math on different things, how we change stuff, and coming up with different other kind of proposals and things like that. Since the shard economy changes, so it's definitely been a long process to get here. Gear is way more complicated than shards. Like shards are kind of one and done. You solve that after you get the character to 330, you're done. You don't got to worry about it. Whereas gear is way more intertwined with so many other systems in this game. It is part of the core progression. I mean, like the character shards were also part of that for a while, but it's so much longer of a runway for gear compared to shards. So it's complicated to say the least, and I don't envy our math guys here trying to figure out how to solve these problems without breaking things, and one of the part of why we're rolling it out slowly is because we want to make sure we're confident in each of these changes. Like the worst case scenario would be like we having to roll some of these back or something, or being like, oh, we didn't actually, that's not good, we can't keep doing this.
Yeah,
so we want to really make sure that like we're committed to this. These are the things we care about, and we're going to stick with it for sure. And so I think we got a pretty good package here of stuff.
I'm curious about this, and I just want to spearhead this. It feels to me like a big reason why I see a lot of people kind of talk about gear changes aren't going to be addressed, right? And I've seen people make this argument within the last week, right? Because I actually highlighted this in a video recently.
Watching those conversations in the last week, I'll tell you that much.
Yeah, right. And the biggest argument people make, and I get, is gear has got to be like the biggest driver of revenue for you guys, right? Like that's going to be a big focus. Is that gear. And so did you guys find it hard to kind of part with that? Were there people who are like, but this is like kind of leaving money on the table? Was there conversations like that? Or is it just kind of like, the game's progressing, we're good with this?
I think there's like the game has evolved in a lot of different ways, and I think
Yeah.
it's important now to make sure we like smooth over the process for people getting into this game and have gotten into this game over the last couple of years to get into that end game more than anything else,
Yeah.
right? It's the like the the cool thing about the shards was like all of a sudden it felt like very easy to grab the character you want and start gearing them up, right?
Mm.
Where
Yeah.
before is like the grind felt a little slow, like you'd roll on a couple nodes, you'd get a couple shards, and it didn't feel like you're making a lot of meaningful progress on from the day to day. Overall, like over the course of a month or two, you'd eventually unlock this character and you'd get it. But with the shard update, you've accelerated a lot of that going that time to now unlocking those characters, and now you want to gear them all as well. So that's
Yeah.
like the shard stuff also makes this issue worse, right? Because
Mm.
now you have more characters you need to gear up, which puts a greater pressure on especially low level gear to get some of those guys just started. So we've definitely felt that it was time to try and figure out like how do we get people further into this game. We have relics here. That's the system where people are interested in engaging with, and that's the level that we want players to get to. But there's a lot of roadblocks along the way there. So how do we get them past that? It's less about like what money we're leaving on the table and more about like how do we make sure the game is a healthy structure and feels good to play more than anything else, right? I mean, definitely, of course, like our company, that's life. Money's always an
Of
important
course, it
thing,
has
but
to be part of the conversation.
that's part of the conversation. But I'd say the focus is definitely on like how do we make sure that the feel of this game is correct, especially for
Mm.
players coming in now. Because you imagine a player coming in today and being like, "Wow, the path for me getting to a relic character is quite far off,"
Right.
and it doesn't. It's not very motivating for someone who's like, you've got a friend who's like, "Hey, I'm playing in this in GOTB or whatever. Come and join us." He's like, "Cool. Well, like if I start today, I'm a year or two out from that, right? Like,
Yeah.
there's no way I participate in Geonosis territory battle for a long, long time." So that's like, we want to make sure people get to be able to participate in the core loops of the game and actually
Mm.
be able to experience it sooner rather than later,
Yeah.
and that I think that's where the game really shines as well. So getting them to
Yeah.
the part of the game that feels good.
I like that. And maybe it's almost like an evolution of the game where, for the longest time, getting to gear 12 or gear 11, even before we did gear 12, that
Hmm.
was where the grind was. And it's almost like now we're shifting to the grind is going to be more about relics almost. Like this is where the focus is. And so we're going to kind of ease that gate to get from start to gear 13. And then, yeah, once you get to gear 13, the gate from relic 1 to relic 9 is a bit steep. So that kind of makes sense to me, especially with the introduction of relic 9. And I think we see the same thing with the shard change where now, I mean, 7 stars is like, almost everybody's roster at the end game. They're going to have almost everyone at 7 stars, right? Like there's not much of a gate to get to 7 stars right now.
Yeah. And they said like in the past, right? Like you'd bring in characters to events and things like that, and they were, very functional at like G8 or G9, and then eventually
Right.
got up to G11, G12, right? And then, but now if like you 7-star character, and he's gear 5, like that character has probably very little use to you if you're at 6, 7, 8 million, whatever GP, right? Like there's not. You're basically just waiting to use that character to get to relics anyways, right? In a lot of cases. So
Yeah.
and like below this, like is kind of a knock-on effect because we're increasing a lot of the gear drops, especially for the low level gear there. That also has a knock-on effect for relics 1 through 5, right? Like you're
Yeah.
going to have more stuff to salvage from all these things as well. Granted, like a lot of like the core gear stuff, and people are asking what core gear means. It's like stun guns, carbantes, stun cuffs, the droid collars. I think we mentioned it somewhere and we list them out here at some point, but the ones that you are really, really pinched on are like ones everyone's going to want. And then there's a lot of stuff that I think everyone will go like, "Oh, cool. I get more relic materials out of this as well." And,
Right.
and that definitely will help people get going a little bit faster as well.
That's great. Yeah, I'm excited to see what this looks like. And we're just talking about phase 1 here, which I want to kind of, I'm sure you can't tell me much about phase 2, but I kind of want to focus on that and here in just a little bit. But before we get there, notably, there's a crunched piece of gear that I'm not seeing on your post. I actually just control left it to make sure. No Kyrotechs in there. Is there any plans to address anything dealing with Kyrotechs, or are those pretty much going to stay the same, or is it just going to be rolled into, obviously one of these bullet points is approximately doubling the drop rate for gear on the PvE hard nodes. Will Kyrotechs be excluded from that? Let's talk about Kyrotechs a little bit.
Yeah, sure. And I think you hit it on the head there, right? This is phase one, and we wanted to go out like strong with a very like big package of stuff that people were like, "Wow, this is
It's an
stuff.
impressive package."
This is a lot of stuff here.
I'm
There's
stoked.
there's a lot of different things to it.
Yeah.
But that's being said, like we want phase two to also have a pretty big impact as well, and there's definitely plans for that as well. So I definitely would love to talk more about that, but given the what level of fidelity it's in right now, I worry about committing to something that like that would get me in trouble later down the line. But that being said, I hope phase two is around the same level of impact as this one. So it should be some more pretty big stuff, and hopefully
Wow.
we'll kind of address some of the other things that you mentioned here. Potentially Kyrotechs, potentially other relic materials and things like that as well. So there's a lot more to come. Like this is the first steps towards this. We know that like the G8 materials and that stuff are ones that people are still very pinched on.
Yeah.
Kairos is sort of the next tier above that. So again, we want to take this kind of step by step and make sure we're not diving too deep too fast. Because the other part of this as well, like we want to make sure we respect people's time in the game that they've spent over the last couple of years, right? Like if you've spent a whole bunch of energy in your life trying to get this gear, and then all of a sudden it gets trivialized, like tomorrow we went too hard, I think that could turn a lot of people off, being like, well, why did I even try? Right? Like I just basically handing it to so many people. So there's like this like weird balance of like we want to make sure everyone gets it, but we want to do it at a pace that makes everyone feel okay about it. Because there's definitely the people who have people playing like you and me who played this for 3-4+ years, right? Like
6 years nearly, Crumb.
6 years nearly,
Yep.
anniversary's
at
coming
launch.
right up.
Yeah.
So there's a balance to that, but also we want to like we can't be too worried about it because we also need to make these changes happen.
And I appreciate that because yeah, I mean if I'm sitting at 6 years invested in this game and somebody who's just starting can catch up to where I'm at within 6 months, that feels a little bit weird to me. But at the same time, I want there to be more appeal for new players, which is I'm stoked about these changes, not just for what it means for me personally, but I want this, like, how I feel about the game. I want the game to be around for a really long time. And if we're not addressing like, wow, how daunting is it to join this game right now in terms of gear, then I think we're missing a lot. And so I'm stoked to see that happening for those newer players. Another question here. Somebody's asking if we can put an end to Mark IV stun guns. I think that's funny. We're valuing the other gear. I don't think that any changes would come to Mark IV stun guns necessarily, although we have enough of those, Crumb. Let's see. Would you guys be open to adding core gear to gear challenges? Is one of the questions. I think you do. You've addressed that, right? The gear challenges.
The daily challenges we're talking about?
I'm not sure what he means by gear challenges. Rough timing on the phases. Somebody's asking for. I'm guessing you can't give that, but it does look like in October you've got more information coming about phase one. Guessing you can't commit to this, but would it loosely be expected that we'd see the phase one update hitting around October?
Yeah, and so to that first question, I believe they're talking about the daily challenges, which yes, we're adding like that core gear, the stun
that's
guns,
addressed.
biotechs, that stuff.
Yeah.
That's in there. That's the first bullet up top. So
Right
I
here.
believe that's so maybe I'm misunderstanding their question, so I'm not sure. But and then yeah, in terms of timeline, we're definitely not committing to anything right now. We're in the midst of implementing a lot of this stuff, and we've already done a bunch of it. We've done some QA on it. It seems to all be working fine, but we just want to make sure we go through all the details here, and there's no other major bugs. So as we get close to each of these, I want to kind of like, because there's a lot of stuff here, but there's still probably a lot of questions around like, what does it mean for the territory war prizes to be flattened out for across stars, right? Like,
Yeah.
or for territory battles, for example, like what does that actually look like? How many am I actually getting at 1 star versus 25 star? And we want to make sure we get those out to you guys before we launch. So the plan right now is to talk about it in October, part of the road ahead. Hopefully do another video with Doja on that. It'll be a lot of fun, and we can go into the kind of details there. I would say the timeline for this overall is the next few months.
Okay.
So
for all the phases or just this first phase?
I would say for at least the first couple phases.
Can you tell us how many phases there are?
Well, there's kind of a wait and see approach on this. Like we have ideas, we know what's going to happen in phase two, and we're definitely working on that.
Okay.
Whether we need to intervene further with phase 3, it's definitely a possibility. I'll say we've sketched out 4 phases or so of
Woo!
different potential moments we could do.
All
I would
right.
say it's probably going to be likely like 2 or 3, somewhere around there. Maybe it's more. Again, we really have to see like the impact of this stuff and make sure that like things are going smoothly. Because the other part of this is like there's so many opportunities here with how complicated gear is, just to
Yeah.
create other bottlenecks and other issues down the line where it's like, oh, now you have more of this, which means you need this other thing to keep up with it as well. And now that thing's the pain point as well. That's what we don't want to just like solve one problem to introduce another one. A part of that earlier system. So it's definitely is definitely going to be something we had to play by ear over the course of the next couple of months here. But I'll say at least 2, potentially more.
Cool. All right. I like it. I like it. And especially if, it sounds like you've already told us, if anyone missed it, that the next update, the phase 2, is going to have about as much of a splash as this first one has had. And so if this is just the first half, at least, I think that'll be pretty exciting. Here's another good question. You have another little bit that we can take a few more questions, Crumb?
Yeah, I got a few more minutes here, and then I got to run probably in a little while. I got to get some lunch here. So
Okay.
let's see when my next meetings is. Oh yeah, I've got time for another 20 minutes or so.
Another 20 minutes tops. Okay, we'll probably be less than that. So we'll just do questions about anything now. Isn't this update making? This is from Sale. I'm not sure how to pronounce this, but I think this is an interesting question. Isn't this update making there a bigger gap between new and old players?
No, I mean there are. See, here's one of the core problems as well is that like players who are farther along in the game are more efficient at taking the resources out of a mode, right? And what I mean by that, like if me at say like 2 million GP and you at 6 million GP, we both go into a territory battle. You get more out of that territory battle than I do, right? Just because you're getting higher stars and whatnot. So, and our game is nested on top of each other's with more and more different, like each, like no one at the top like graduates to other modes, right? I just do everything at the top. I do all the territory battles, I do all the conquests, I do everything, right? So there's definitely a problem where we're trying to like target stuff that are specific to those newer mid-level players and not increase the gap as much as we can. Again, everyone needs more gear, so we want to make sure we have to do it for everyone as well, but extra stuff for the newer and mid-level players. So that's like, the territory battle price changing, right? Like the top box is not changing, and if you're already in that top box, you're going to keep getting the same stuff as before, but everyone below you who's trying to catch up to you is going to get more than they would, and more than you would have gotten when you were in their position. So the idea is to try and catch them up faster. Yes, the goalpost is always going to be kind of slowly moving forward as the people at the top get better and better, but hopefully people are going to catch up to them a little bit quicker. And probably not like you're not gonna like become the 10 million GP player out of tomorrow out of just getting new territory battle prizes, but you'll get there a lot faster than you would have previously. Same thing with galactic challenges, right? Like there's kind of 2 different ways we have to do this, of like stuff that's broad and then stuff that like only affects a new player. That's actually really hard to do because, as I said, everything is compounded on top of each other. So if I just crank up the awards, most likely the high tier guys are just going to get more. So we have to do these kind of like very specific things about that are really, really like focused on them. And there's like some ideas we went through of like, how do we give new players stuff? Is it like we give them at like a certain tier and like GAC or something? And then there's like some weird incentives to like, well, if I just don't go up the ladder, is it better for me to stay lower and things like that? So there's a lot to like balance around making sure the incentives are still there to grow, but also making sure that people get there faster. It's the same thing with the shards on, or the increasing amount of gear on the shard nodes, is that like players who are farming characters are going to get that more, but also we shouldn't make it so that the nodes that are just about gear are now worse than those nodes, because that's where a lot of players who are at the end game are going to go to get their gear, right? So it's like trying to like shift where the focus would be. If you're an end game player, you get off that kind of focus, whereas the new players get there as well. So yeah, it's definitely something we're concerned about, but the goal with these changes is definitely to catch people up as much as it is to give everyone more stuff.
Good. Okay, yeah, that's good to see, and that's kind of what I was thinking about it as well, pretty more or less. Okay, shifting gears back to Territory Wars for a second. Home Slice, good college friend of mine, actually. You know him personally, great guy. This is a big question. I really hope you can give an answer to this. Will the Territory War matchmaking system take into account the number of GLs that each guild has?
Yeah, so I don't want to get too much into the matchmaking system about how it's weighting stuff and things like that, but I would say you're going to get a more accurate battle between you and the other guilds.
Okay.
There's definitely ways it accounts for, how do I say it? Like how like different powerful rosters, like it takes that into account in a deeper way. And there's
Okay.
also the loss streak prevention as well that helps you. Like if you are getting stuck against people with a ton of GLs, then you're obviously going to get knocked down a bit to face easier opponents as well there. So there's
Okay.
like some sort of self-correcting there as well. But yeah, like there's some ways we're dealing with that. I don't know how else to say it more than that, other than getting into the specifics of the matchmaking system.
So it's not just, if you maybe you could answer it this way. It's not just looking at the GP. It's of each
It's
player.
not just
It's
that's a good
looking
way
into
to say it.
specific metrics like Zetas, mods, GL, stuff like that is going to be taken into account. You just can't comment specifically on what yet.
Yeah, I'll say that it's more than just GP. It is definitely looking at a broader,
Okay.
kind of perspective of your roster and how effective you are as a guild member versus another guild member.
Okay. I think that's
Um,
good. That's healthy.
Yeah, I wish I could tell you more. I don't know. Some people were like, "Just tell us the answer. Just tell us how it works." But there's definitely some caginess for me on that side, just because we don't want to like make sure there's any loopholes that people can start exploiting really easily. Hopefully not.
Okay. Yeah, that makes sense. I just want to see every detail in the code. That's all.
Yeah, you and everyone else, man.
Oh man. Okay, it's actually, that kind of reminds me, when I visited CG once, I talked to the guy who was in charge of all of the drop rates. I forget his name, but he sat down and he was like telling us a lot. And our handler at the time, the guy who was in your position before you, he was sitting there. He looked so uncomfortable. He was like, "Oh my gosh, please don't tell them too much." I'm pretty sure he told us too much, and I didn't tell anybody anything he said. But it was just really funny. All right, here's another question. You're not going to be able to get too specific on this, but I think maybe we can talk a little more generally. Comes from Jacket Fro. Awesome screen name, by the way.
Good name.
Talk about the stat change increase from Relic 8 to Relic 9 a little bit. What's that going to be like? Can we, now I know that we've mentioned already it's going to emphasize tanks. Are we going to see kind of like the same kind of increase we've seen from Relic levels, or would this one be notably larger, or are you just tight-lipped on it?
I mean, I think we're going to see it later today, so you guys are going to see it very soon. So, Relic 9, the Territory War changes are in the update this afternoon.
Hold on to your butts.
So so the question is the scale of difference between like how much an impact 8 does versus 9, and it's about the same. I'd say it's a little bit more, and there's some other stats
Okay.
it kind of focuses on as well. I know, I'm trying to remember. I don't think like protection and health was some of the, or health is part of it, but protection wasn't part of the earlier relic tiers for some of the tank subsets. So those ones are going to get a little bit more survivability boost as well, and that should help them, along with some of the other changes of just like obviously getting more health and tenacity and all that kind of stuff as well. But this should definitely make tanks a better, or at least a better like choice for your team, right? I think a lot of cases, especially before we made a lot of changes around the things like Vader, which I know is not super popular, but the changes before around like ignoring defense and whatnot, it was pretty easy to like one shot a tank off the board.
Right.
Hopefully get into a world where tanks are pretty valuable and have their own kind of place in the meta.
Okay, cool. And I do hope you won't be able to say much about this, but just because I've got you here and I want to air my grievances, I really hope that we take our time introducing Relic 9 into GL requirements. One of the biggest frustrations I have with Relic 8 and how difficult it is to get there is I'm also going for GLs, and I would really like to have player agency to decide which characters I want to Relic 8. And right now, with how the level of spending I do on the game and where my play level is at, my Relic 8 choices are 100% dictated by the GL requirements, unless I decide I'm not going to go for GLs. And so I hope you guys take your time requiring Relic 9 for GLs, because I'd like to choose who I want to Relic 9, not just do who the GL requirements are for.
Mm-hmm. I hear you.
That's a good answer. All right, Crow, I want to thank you for coming on so fast after this post. I think this was a great interview. And overall, I would say I am almost 100% just stoked about what's coming. Still some apprehension about Territory Wars and Relic 9, of course, and all of that stuff. But the gear changes, by and large, just seeing this comprehensive of a gear overhaul, I think is very positive for the game. Before we jump off, was there anything that I didn't ask about that you thought you'd like to clarify or say to the community?
No, I think we covered a lot of it here. I'll just say that the gear stuff is something that we know has been really important, and we've been working on it for a while. And I'm so stoked that we can finally talk about it. And I can't wait for it to roll out for you guys to get your hands on, because I know it's a big deal for everyone who plays this game. As someone who is trying to get my Kenobi team ready to go, I cannot wait for these changes to happen sooner rather than later. So, I think it's going to be a good first step for us here. And then with a lot of these changes, like the matchmaking, these are a lot of big steps for us, and we're ready to take another step as soon as we can. So it's exciting times for Galaxy Heroes. Like, it's as I said, it was funny. Got to watching a lot of conversations over the last week or so, knowing that this is coming today, being like, oh, they'll never change gear, they'll never make any adjustments for it. It's just going to be like this forever, being like, well, I wish I could make a bet with you right now, because you're gonna be surprised as of Wednesday next week. So
yeah.
I wish we could have done this in video form. This was just coming. The details were just in flight up until a week or so ago, so I just didn't have a chance to get a video for this together. But I wish I could have shown this to you guys on camera and walked you through some of the more details here. But I think we'll talk about this in the road ahead in October.
Video for the road ahead.
That's what we're shooting for right now. I'm working on the script as we speak. So
all right. More videos.
We'll have some more fun stuff around that, and then of course we got the the SpeedGek stuff coming up too soon. So
I keep forgetting about that. Do we know when that's going to be?
We do not. I'm talking with actually Doja, trying to schedule out the exact date for that. He should be reaching out to you guys shortly with a schedule. See if you guys can make it.
Cool. And I'm going to go on record, by the way. I heard your interview with Heinze and Gridden. I'm glad you talked to those dudes. And when they asked about the gear changes, I heard what you said. And I said it in a video. I said, I think they're working on gear changes. I'm just saying, guys. I told you so. I told you.
Yeah, it was like that video last week where they're like, should I talk about it here? Nah, it's not really ready for me to talk about. I'm still writing up the final post on it. Maybe I should mention it. And I was like, no, I'll just hint at it and just be a bit of an ass about it. So yeah, I'm glad you got that hint, because I drop those all the time. Not every time everyone picks them up. And
there's a big difference. I carved it out in my video. Is whenever in the past I've heard CG mention the gear crunch, it kind of feels like we see that you guys are frustrated with the gear, not we see that we are frustrated with the gear and we want to change it. And so that was kind of the first subtle acknowledgement of, this is something we are internally looking at because we think it might be a problem. And so that's kind of what clued me in that maybe they're actually thinking about changing something. So I'm excited about it.
Yeah. I mean, so we got a lot of players inside the studio. Almost everyone on this team is playing Galaxy Heroes daily. So, I think we see a lot of that pain ourselves. So we're not like, oh, it's someone's mad about something on the internet. It's like, no. We've experienced it firsthand. It sucks and we want to change it, So there's a lot of passionate people inside the studio trying to make stuff happen. And we fought, hard to make sure that this package was good. Not to say that there are people against it or anything like that, but just we wanted to make sure there was 5 or 6 really solid bullet points here that are going to change, meaningfully impact your daily experience with gear. And that was the goal here, that you notice that this is an impact, because we've done a lot of things for gear over the last year or so that have helped, but they're so invisibly small that when they add up to do a big thing, talking about Galactic Challenges, for example, or Conquest, there's a lot of new stuff coming through those game modes, but it doesn't feel at a pace that feel like it's meaningfully changed your trajectory in Galaxy Heroes. And we hope these really do that.
I completely agree. That's how I've kind of viewed it as well. As any time we've addressed the gear crunch, I mean, maybe you're looking at data and it's like, well, we've given you all of this stuff over this amount of time, but from the player experience, it just doesn't feel like it's that much. And so it still feels like a slog. And so this is the first one where it's like, wow, that's a lot of stuff on the page right there. And there's still more coming. So I'm pretty stoked about it. And hopefully phase 2 is just as exciting as phase 1 is. So once again, guys, please like the video to show CG that you're excited about the gear changes. I get the concerns. Top concerns for me are the emphasis on winning in Territory Wars, and of course what this is going to do to guilds. I think that is probably the number one concern I have is how this is going to affect guilds that are underneath 300 million GP. More on that to come later. And look at that, Doja Fett just dropped in the chat as well. We'll have to say hi to him after we end the video. So anyway, we're gonna get out of the video, and as always, my brothers, don't forget,